Hey, I'm back. Fourth book of the Getting to Know Me, Getting to Know Some of My Books series I'm doing. And this one is really special. If you watched my first one, you know that I'm a medium and a channel. This book, The Story of Ervin James. Now, Ervin James is my great-great-great-grandfather. He was born into slavery and lived most of his life as a slave, or enslaved to be more precise. He was still a man, but he had to live in slavery. Now, when I say inspired, this book was inspired. I first learned about his story actually late in my life. We went to a family reunion in 2019, before the pandemic. And we were at the cemetery in Jamestown. And we were at the cemetery in Jamestown. And as you can imagine, you know, if I let myself, I can feel, I was like, there's a lot of activity here. There's a lot of activity. Unsettled, unrested souls. But that wasn't even the point. I got this message, I need to tell the story. And I'm like, who? They're not looking at me. A year later, get the knock again, like a tap. Tell the story. I'm like, maybe. We'll see. That was enough. That maybe was enough to get them like, okay, she said yes. I did not say yes. But they thought I said yes. Next thing I know, I can't sleep because voices from the 1800s are trying to talk to me all night long. And I'm like, I'm not writing this yet. I was literally working on my play, Four Wives and a Will, trying to get that finished for submission. I was like, I can't do this right now. They're like, just start researching. And that's how it began. So I did. I started researching, and I did that for, God, I can't even, thinking back, maybe 2 weeks, a week, two, trying to finish up this other project, do some submissions, and started researching for Ervin James' book. This included going into census data, Ancestry.com, and just trying to find what I could, because of course, our Black ancestors weren't allowed to read and write. So their written history does not really exist. It wasn't recorded. They weren't even considered full humans. So why would they have recorded their stories? Unfortunately, that was the case. There was a little bit I could find in the census about births of the children and all of that. And I knew that he'd been sold land, right? And I was able to use that. So most of the story, and this is one of those things that's, I call it's historical fiction. Why? Because I can't prove it. Can't prove it. It's inspired by the former slave, because it's a lot of it can't be documented, the actual journey. But when I tell you, I wrote this thing, I mean, from the time I researched to the time I finished, it was 5 weeks, you know? And that's me having to do everything else I was doing. I was working at the time too. I was still at, had a regular job at the time. This one literally spoke to me. When I checked my pendulum, if you looked at my first video, probably my first one, with this book, I talk about how you can check using your pendulum to see the accuracy or saying if something worked. So I used my pendulum to actually check how much of it was was accurate, because I was curious. I'm just the author. I'm just like just writing, and I was like, look, this has to be interesting, has to be a partnership. That's what I told them, right? On the other side. Has to be interesting, has to be a partnership. Oops, it just fell. And we're gonna have to, you know, make it the story. And they said about 80% of it is pretty much what happened. But they won't tell me what 80%, or I should say what 20% isn't. That's okay. It's fiction. But this is the story of my great-great-great-grandfather who founded a community for freed blacks in the year 1870 in South Carolina. He did this by overcoming a lot of odds, doing what was improbable in that area and in that time. But because he did that, he created a place, a safe place and a safe space for over 200 African Americans to live near Florence, South Carolina. And because they weren't having to be sharecroppers, they had freedom. And this is so important because they lived on their own land. They didn't have to be sharecroppers. They had options, they had freedom. This community lasted until the 50s, and then the change of commerce and our systems of how people were making money, going from farming, industrial factories and all of that. A lot of people did migrate away from South Carolina at that time in the 50s and moved to places like DC and Maryland and other places to continue their journey. But it planted a mindset of independence, I believe, of can do, that continues. So he created the legacy, and this is the story I channeled for him. It's the story of Ervin James, and it is right now available exclusively on ebook on Amazon. You can get the paperback other places, including Amazon, and you can get it from Blurb. It's blurb.com. Thanks.